Welcome back to the podcast. For me, Grayling is all about the day, but it's starting right. And for me, it's starting with a good breakfast. So I've had that, I've had a big full fry up, and also fishing with friends as well. And Grayling for me is a little bit more sociable because of that slightly slower day as well. So that makes it really, really fun from that point of view. Good breakfast. It's about 20 to 11, so that's how rushed we are. And I'm joined by my friend Paul Procter today, and we're going to just have a fun day's fishing, and we were talking about how we were going to set up, what we were going to do, and we're just going to play it by ear. I took him onto a bridge. We've both driven about 2.5 hours and met in the middle somewhere, so it's handy from that point of view. We're in chalk stream country as well. So we're hoping that we might be able to spot some fish. We did from the bridge, and Paul saw a fish rise as well. So we're sort of keeping options open, and probably you may have heard in the background that Paul said, look, there's a stonefly, like needlefly or something, on the fence here as well. So we can take those things as positives. I used to fish this place years and years back, and there would be brief hatches over lunchtime. So I'm kind of hoping there's an outside chance of that today as well. So we've left the Euro kits behind. We're going to fish possibly sighted nymphs to sighted fish, and also have an indicator as well. But yeah, it's a very, very civilised start to the day. Paul, it's great to catch up with you as always. Are you well, my friend?
Pete, first of all, thanks for the invite to come and fish with you today. Our catch-up's long overdue, obviously, and yeah, those usual mixed sort of emotions going through me just now. It's a piece of water I haven't fished, and there's that sort of excitement, but also nervousness. Water's perhaps, as you know, we've had rain, it's carrying a wee bit more colour than I think we'd both like, only in terms of sighting fish. In terms of a fishing condition, it's gorgeous, and as you know, and sure many of the listeners know, that a wee bit of colour in a stream isn't such a bad thing. It makes the fish feel that bit more confident. So I'm kind of hopeful, but I'm also nervous. You know me, I like the dry fly fishing. I think it's the first thing I said when we got out of the car, where's the dry fly water kind of thing. And we've already walked down the beach, you've shown me, and there's some gorgeous looking water, and I'm going to make it my business around about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Hopefully some large darks will put in appearance, and we'll find a few rising fish. I mean, I think apart from your company today and chewing the fat, which we haven't done for a long time, my goal today is to try and nobble a grayling on a dry fly, which is where I'm at. But don't get me wrong, I'm just preparing now, and once you turn this mic off, I'm going to be quizzing you on the depth we need to be setting our indicators at and what kind of nymphs we'll be using. So it's great to be here, gorgeous day, and yeah, let's see what happens.
And you said that you hadn't fished this section before, but we were talking just previously about, you know, how long we've known each other, and it goes into decades. And I think the first time we fished together was here. Yeah, we've just seen a fish rise at the back of a tree as well. So that's a great sign as well. So it may be that we don't hang the nymphs on. It may be that we just say, sod it. Let's see if we can either bring a fish up or see if we can spot another rise and go for it there. So that's encouraging. But yeah, I think this is the river that we first fished together a long time ago. And I remember it really well because you being a left-hander, me being a right, I think at one stage, and I've talked about it previously on the podcast, I think, that Euro nymphing was just starting to wake up a little bit. And we didn't fish side by side to start with, and we had our setups, and we were both trying to figure out what to do best, and we caught a few fish that way. And then the thing I remember is it was just downstream, actually, from where we were fishing. We drove along the road, and it reminded me of it, that we fished side by side, you being a lefty, me being right, and just catching some fish. And that's, again, the social aspect of it all, isn't it?
Absolutely, Pete. I recall that day. I remember we caught quite a lot of fish. It was fantastic. And again, as ever, when I visit a new piece of water, there is that sort of degree of nervousness that you think, ooh, will I catch some fish? And it's always nice catching fish on not just a new river, but also a new beach and exploring water and things like that. I mean, obviously I'm going to be grateful and use you as my eyes today a wee bit in terms of fish location. Already when we were walking down, you were kind of saying, oh, this is a good pot, Paul, and keep your eye out on here, which is all very helpful. But yeah, I'm digressing. Getting back to that day, I recall it. I can remember we sort of, not on purpose, but did our own thing for an hour or two, and then it kind of happened that we were side by side. You were working up one side at river, I was working up to the side of river. In fact, I can remember, I recall a fish rising in a certain pool. We were both nymphing at the time. I was switching to dries. I could see you contemplating it. I could see the smoke coming out of your ears. Shouldn't I? And I think you did. And then there was this sort of standoff. You cast at it. No, you take it. No, I insist you take it. And I can't remember who cast at it in the end, but it was one of them situations.
And has it got you now? You've seen a fish rise, we've talked about nymphs and things like that. Are you already thinking of formulating a strategy that may have been slightly different to the one you first thought of?
I'll be honest, Pete, what I'm rigging up with now, you're doing all the talking, I'm doing the setting up. When this mic goes off, I'm going to say, every man for himself and jump in river. Not at this moment. As seasoned anglers, we know the kind of window. In fact, I just wrote an article for you about that, about fish lies, and I strongly believe that fish move into certain lies at a given time for just to feed on certain insects, and that might be an hour or two. So I'm not in any rush to get onto the dry fly water just yet. Yeah, I'm happy to rest that. As soon as I see a large dark, though, you can guarantee those nymphs will be coming off and a wee dry fly will be going on. So I'm going to stick to my guns, which is a rare thing. I can be indecisive. I'm going to stick to my guns and pop on a couple of wee nymphs. I think I'll start with perdigons, believe it or not, whether that's a good choice. Maybe a shrimp and a perdigon on a dropper or something like that. I'm assuming we can fish 2 flies here. Okay.
That's the nice thing about here, that there's no real rules. And I think if you see pike and stuff, you can set up for pike and play with those as well. It's a really progressive club, so I kind of like it from that point of view. I think the perdigon's a great shout, and Paul touched on shrimps as well, which is, a staple of chalk stream fish as well. So great choices to start with. If you hear a splosh, you'll know that's me being pushed out the way by Paul, and there's been a large dark come off and a grayling has eaten it. So we're going to go from there. The weather's really nice, actually. We were just talking about whether we needed a rain jacket or not, and at home in Devon as well, we've had my home river, the Tor, has come up about 7 feet. I think that's dropping back. That was overnight as well, and some pretty heavy rain. But today is really nice and calm, still, bit of sun around. It's ideal for bugs to want to go and do their thing. So fingers crossed for that. And as a result of that too, perhaps the fish will be relatively active and keeping half an eye on the water. So we'll see, and we'll keep reporting back. River's not huge. We're both fishing. Paul's fishing a guideline 9'9" 2 weight. And I've got a old Z-axis 9.5 4 weight. And there's plenty of room there to cast. There's trees that will want to nick some flies, I'm sure, at some stage, but river's probably about 25, 30 feet across, something along that sort of magnitude. Where we're going to get in is ankle deep, but the far side and middle, there's usually some fish around there. It's about knee deep, and with the sun as well, I think there's a chance it's going to be behind us. So I think from a spotting fish point of view, that's going to be useful. There's some position, people like Paul, it's second nature too, but it's worth thinking about those things and about rising fish and the potential for them to do that with no eyelids when the sun's right in their eyes. How likely are they going to be doing that, and do we need to be thinking about the more shaded spots for them if the sun's in that direction? And they're the sort of things you think about as you're setting up and getting ready for a day's fishing.
You just pressed a button there, Pete, in terms of what you're saying about sun position. Yeah, another rise. Well spotted. this time of year, the sun's tracking that much lower in the sky, sort of shadowing the horizon, if you like. And if you're in the wrong position, i.e. the sun is behind you and it casts your shadow upstream, you've just got to be aware of that. I have actually seen it a number of times, and especially on the chalk streams, where anglers have gone up an edge with the sun behind them, it's casting their shadow way ahead of them and alerting the fish all is not right. So just tagging that on to the advice that Pete gave you there, that's all.
That's a great point. And this is, today's about just two friends going fishing, but if we can throw some tips and hints in, and they'll mostly come from Paul, of course, but if there is something that comes through, something that we notice, then it's kind of nice to be able to share that with you. But yeah, it's one of those days that you think, yeah, I'm pleased I fly fish. One of the things when you're showing a friend a new stretch of water is that you want them to like it like you do. And I was sort of saying to Paul that this is a spot I think is really good. It's lovely when you can hear him getting in and saying, what a pool, what a pool. And watching him already just fishing, somebody who's at the peak of their powers, the way they work up the river, the quietness, stopping for a few moments, seeing if they can spot a fish, taking their time, breaking the pools down, and then deciding where they're going to launch their fly. As I said, we've seen, while we were recording the first segment, 3 or 4 fish go. We've seen a couple more go. They're not hard on feeding. I've sort of put on a dry and then decided, just as insurance to start with, to hang a nymph off the back of it just to see, and we'll go from there. And I think Paul's got an indicator and a nymph on a small perdigon that he's fishing at the moment. Mine's sort of a pheasant tail in a caddis sort of style, really caddis nymph style. So not used it before, but I thought it might be fun to try. The beads are neutral colour really, so it's a drab fly, so we'll see. Paul says that a little bit of colour in the water, but there's enough, without my sun is on here. I'm sort of 20 feet back from the river, but I can see the bottom of the near bank very, very clearly, very, very easily, so I take that as a good sign. So we'll see. But the thing with my initial take from this is, we've been around the block a bit, we've done a bit of fishing, both of us, but still get excited about it. And I think that's why we love this so much. Just been one of those lovely mornings, slowly working up the river. I went downstream a little bit to have a look in a pot that looked too nice not to fish, and had a small fish come off just as I was bringing it in, and that was about it. And I could hear some sploshing around upstream where Paul was getting into fish as well, and found a nice channel, a lovely bubble line, little bit more depth and some fish go through. But it's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, quite interesting, Pete, actually. I had a bit of a misfire. When you went downstream, I was torn between, as you know, we'd sort of, thought about perhaps nymphing was the best route. Then we had a few rising fish. Well, I climbed into the river, a fish road. I thought I'll just pop the nymph up in front of it. I was just fishing a single tiny perdigon, pretty inoffensive, I would think, and no takers at all. Then I'm torn. I'm this, should I be on dry fly, and I switched to dry fly, and that put the kiss of death on it. Not a single fish rose after that. So waited, and you bimbled off downstream. Then I thought, bugger it, I'll just switch back to nymph. Went back, and there was a channel. The light was just right. I could see a few scallops, but couldn't see fish in them. And as we discussed, the ideal place for singular fish. Anyway, I found a concentration of fish, and so you came up behind me. What was interesting, you got a fish behind me as well, and a trout, which was quite interesting. It shows you that fish just rose up there. Shows you if you're quiet and go about your business, because I could see you shadowing the far bank as I was this bank, that fish can be quite tolerant, which was interesting. But perhaps more interesting, we got up to the head of the pool here. There's some deeper water, and I'm going to use it as an excuse. I got out to take some photographs, actually. No, I couldn't be bothered to switch to go deeper. That fish is up again up there, actually. Sorry about that. Nice. And I had a joke. I said, I'll let you fish this through, Pete, and that buys me the next pool upstream, which fortunately it's worked out because there's fish rising. No, but seriously, what was really interesting is I'd sort of gently stroke the water higher up with a nymph. You made the effort. Key point here, making the effort to switch to deeper tactics, and 2 casts, 2 fish right off the bat, and the second one was quite a nice grayling. So yeah, it's really good fun, and it's nice. I often fish on my own, as you know, and I know you prefer fishing with company and friends. I think it's because you're scared of the dark and things like that, but anyhow. It's interesting to compare notes like this, because I wouldn't have made that switch. I would have just focused on that next fish upstream and kind of moved on. So it's a good illustration, and it shows, as I often preach, and I need to take notice of, make the effort to change.
I think if they were rising trout, he'd have done that very, very quickly if we were in trout season. But yeah, I'm just very, very lucky. And I was sort of preparing for the next pool because I know that's a little bit deeper. And I'd been fishing a nymph off the back of a dry, fishing the dry purely as an indicator. But then I thought, well, if something happens, I can change. And then went to the yarn indicator and set myself a little bit deeper, slightly heavier flying, and got lucky. Might be someone else in there. We've been sort of taking some photographs and chatting, so we might throw in there again, see if anyone else is home at the moment. But the yarn indicator's working really well. And you had a strange experience with the yarn as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I've never had this happen, Pete, in all the years, and I don't. We discussed it when we were having breakfast about setting your stall out for any method if you've been prepared to travel, and I'm a blinking long way south, but even so, the slep's been a fair one for you as well. So what you don't want to do is turn up to the river, set your sights on one particular method, albeit if we like dry fly, as I do, as we all do. Sometimes you've just got to knuckle down and fish to the conditions, and we're in this deep scallop here. But yeah, downstream, I was working up this channel, picked off a couple of fish, threw up, and a fish moved. I hadn't seen it. It moved to the piece of wool that I use as an indicator, sheep's wool off the fence. It moved to that. Well, if it didn't eat it, physically take it off the indicator, off the leader. Never had that happen before, Pete. So very, very interesting, very interesting. Good morning, and I think you're itching to get back in here, and I think you should. I'm going to let you have one more fish, and then I'm going to muscle you out.
I told you, listen for the splosh as I get pushed down, because I think the next pool's going to be a little bit of a honey hole as well, and even as the polite host that I wanted Paul to fish this anyway because it's too nice, and I think as you heard, he spotted a fish rising in there. So yeah, I might work through here, have another go, see if we can go for the hat trick. You never know what might happen, so I'll give that a little bit of a go. I changed things up from the drab fly as well, put an orange tag on, slightly bigger. That, you know, what Paul was saying at the beginning about the colour of the water, little bit of colour in the water, and so let's make it stand out a little bit more. And yeah, got lucky.
Pete, is that tied on a jig hook, that nymph you've got on there?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Okay, quite interesting. Yeah, and bead size, what, 2.8, 3 mil?
3 mil, I think.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. The indicator is always when you look at your watch and it's much later than you think it was. We've been through a session, couple of pools where we've caught fish, or Paul has actually. I don't know, I've had one, but it's gone a little bit quieter, and we're sort of thinking what's the reason behind it. We've stopped at the back of a pool, and Paul's having a banana and I'm having some chocolate brownie or something.
You're making it sound like I'm
yeah,
healthy.
he is ultra healthy. He only had eggs on toast this morning, whereas I went for the full breakfast as well. But we're waiting to see if anyone's going to rise at the back, and we were trying to figure out why it had gone a little bit quieter. And did you have any thoughts why that might be, mate?
Well, we just came out of that last pool, Pete, and I think we both acknowledged that certainly the air felt slightly different. It's perhaps a degree or two down, not that that's had any influence on a hatch because there hasn't really been any hatch. But certainly in terms of both fly life and surface activity was when we first arrived. If you cast your mind back, in that first pool we both had fish. You had a very good session in the pool head then. There was them couple of rises upstream. In fact, they were going off the boil, if you remember. I switched back to the nymph and had a nice productive session there. And then we've worked up and picked up fish between us as we've gone. And this last pool, which looks really, really sexy and juicy, and we're both sort of squabbling who's going to fish it and things like that. And it produced one fish just as we came in, and the really good-looking water, or what we felt was the most productive part of the pool, has just yielded absolutely nothing to either of us. And yeah, I sense a change. And look, barometer pressure has a bearing. We both know, we've looked at the weather, as we all do these days, in terms of when we're going fishing, and there's some rain. There's a front coming in. The conditions just now are what I would call really pleasant. There's a watery sun. It's flat, calm. It feels warm, but the barometer could be dropping quite quickly at the moment. How much of a bearing that has on it? I mean, as fishermen, we've got a million excuses why we're not catching, why it's gone off the boil, blah blah blah. I just feel there's a subtle change in the air. Whether that's it or not, I don't know. Your thoughts, Pete?
I think exactly the same. Like, I know we'd had a call and were warned that rain might be coming. The other thing is the position of that pool comparable to where we're standing now and the pool we fished before, is that I wonder if that had a little bit more exposure, because I could feel a gentle breeze behind me, and whether that had taken the temperature down a minuscule amount in that pool by it being. So what we've seen is the pool go from right and then to left, and that bit where it's making that turn to the left again was the pool that we're talking about. And I don't know if there's a slightly different position orientation, that the wind had a tiny little yeah, and so the breeze has just come up a tiny bit. So maybe something like that. Sometimes you can overanalyze these things, but by being aware of them, I think that makes you think about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So yeah, we're going to wait here for 5. There's some other pots, and the bank that we're going to be primarily fishing to is again a little bit more sheltered if there were a tiny bit of a breeze as well. So that may be something to do with it.
Pete, again, as ever, when I'm chatting with you or listening to you, you hit a nerve, press a button. And interesting you say about over-analysing things. Look, we've got a mutual friend, and he always says to me, Paul, you're overthinking it. And all I would add to that, yes, I do tend to think a little bit too much about it. However, there's a lot of things out of our control. So I always think make that effort to control things that you have got influence over at the end of the day.
That's dead right, and I'm an averages man, and I play the averages and think, right, where's my best shot, where's that going to be, and working it from there. But yeah, they're some of the things that you do. And I think, do you think it is because you're guiding as well, that you're analysing things a little bit more quickly as well, because people are paying you money to come fishing with you? Do you think there's an element of that you're sensing these changes when they need to come more quickly?
That's a great question, Pete, and a good observation, and absolutely true. The big thing for me, I notice, when you've actually got a fishing rod in your hand, and I'm the world's worst for that, by the way, is your emotions are very, very different from when you're observing. When you're watching somebody fish, it's totally different emotions if you're holding the rod. We're wired, there's adrenaline. Well, there certainly is for me. In fact, we joked earlier about we both had a wee wobble on when we were setting up the flies. I was fumbling like a beginner, and Pete laughed, and we both thought it was kind of cool that we still having a combined probably neck end of 100 years between us in terms of fishing, and we still both get a wee bit wobbly when we're tackling up. But that's emotions, and that's as it should be in my book. And 100% getting back on track is when I'm sort of sat back observing people fish, you see things that perhaps if I had the rod in my hand, I wouldn't see or be aware of. 100%.
We got some late afternoon sun, and Paul saw a fish rise upstream and went looking for it. So I'm sort of following up a little bit behind, but it looks as though things have quietened down just a little bit. Some of the pots that we thought we might find fish in, and it might be like Paul said, the barometers falling, fish have come off the boil. The signs that we saw, as we said, were early on this morning, and it has just gone a little bit quieter. So we're working up, we're getting towards the top of the beat, and then we'll decide what we'll do. But yeah, the sun's getting low now, and we're obviously in a valley here. It's just above the tip of the valley. And then I think we'll probably start to head back.
Sure.
So that's been a funny session this afternoon, hasn't it?
Pete, after lunch, I think we dropped in, picked up a couple of fish apiece, came onto some really good-looking water, and fair play to you as well as me, even in terms of nymphing. We scoured the stream bed, trying various nymphs, various depths, blah, 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 and we just couldn't buy a take. I think there at the end you saw me, you were in a pool, I'd got caught up in a tree and had to wrestle my fly out, and then managed to do that, and a fish rose in the next pool. As you know, I sort of scurried on up, and it never showed again, just that one rise. That's all we've seen all afternoon. Arguably the prime window at this time of year, sort of midday till 2, 3 o'clock. Got to say, from what we've experienced, the best fishing by a country mile was this morning. Really bizarre, really bizarre.
Yeah, it's been peculiar, hasn't it? And trying to figure that out. We fish pots a little bit deeper, and then part of me thinks, the way that we've been fishing with a single nymph under an indicator, it's been fun. I know we both enjoy casting a fly line as well, and it's been fun to be able to do that. On reflection, do you think Euro would have sought us better, or you just think it's a case the fish probably switched off a bit?
Difficult one to answer that, Pete. It's the same old, you can be on any river, pick a technique or method and then start second guessing it, and 2 hours later I should have done this, I should have done that. I mean, certainly in terms of Euro nymphing, I was out in Bosnia recently, as you know, with a couple of very good Euro nymph anglers. One of them actually fishes for the England team, and they're absolutely devastating. Personally, on this river, just the out and out tightness of it and some of the shallow waters, I think them slightly longer casts are a benefit, as in you don't have to short line, or you couldn't short line. The water was really too shallow and too still. We've seen fish sat on pool tails. The first pool we dropped in was a classic sort of example of that, and for me, Euro nymphing techniques would have been to carry them out to the most effective use would have been difficult to do personally. That's what I felt anyways.
I think you're dead right, and the variety and the depth of the water would have made that slightly trickier as well. Interesting thing for me is that I often talk about the mass of a fly line to propel a nymph to its ultimate destination, and I've been super impressed with you're fishing a 9'9" 2-weight, and that didn't have any problems. You've been chucking some pretty heavy metal on it without too many issues.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's part of the rod, but also to a degree the leader build as well, Pete, which you're familiar with. But also the only other little tip I find is once you get down to, I liken it to saltwater fishing, that if you're using a 10 weight to propel a huge fly around, it can be difficult. I'm doing the same thing scale down, albeit with a 2 weight, but still I'm propelling something a lot heavier than what the rod's ideally designed for. Principally, all I'm using the rod as is a steer, and I'm relying on little holes to inject that line speed and propel the fly, if you like. If that, hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, this 9'9" LPX guideline has been quite a revelation. I've used it now for a year. Earlier this year in spring, as we had a few chats comparing notes as we do. Up in Cumbria, we're experiencing drought conditions right from the start of the season, from March 15th up to mid-June, no rain. Really, really hot weather as well. Rivers were, a mere sort of shadow of themselves. Consequently, you needed to scale down, and I dropped down to this 2-weight. And obviously, you think, well, is it capable of bossing larger fish? And it really was, So yeah, we're very impressed with it. Very impressed with it.
And I've got one, and I found also, and I'm always looking for that holy grail, a rod that you can fish with conventionally, perhaps with a duo should you wish to. But also I found that it lends itself, it'll Euronymph as well, won't it?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was out, I referred to Bosnia, we was using this for Euronymph. And the only thing I would say is principally the butt ring is a wee bit far up the rod for sort of out-and-out Euronymph. It will do it, but if you're full-scale Euronymph and you want the correct sort of rod with a butt ring further down near the handle, so line management's a lot easier.
Nice. Well, what we're doing, we're starting to walk back now, and we're going to see, we bumped into the river keeper and spoke to him a little bit, and he said he'd seen some fish rising a little bit further up. So there were people fishing this, but it looks like they've gone, or they're certainly off this one. I'm guessing that if we do see a rise, and it's that sort of time of day that sometimes this time of year as well, that all of a sudden something might happen for a couple of minutes. It's threatened to a couple of times today, but has not actually come up with the goods. But you never know at this late stage that something might happen. And if not, we'll go back happy anglers. We walked upstream a little bit further, hoped that we might see a rising fish. We bumped into an angler who had been trotting, who was over the moon. He said he'd caught a 2.5 pound grayling. So he was really, really thrilled about that. And it's lovely to be able to share in somebody's success and congratulate them. We didn't see anything more, so we've decided to call it a day. And we're just in the car park now and chatting. Paul asked me the question, how do you think it went? And I think my response was, this morning was amazing, and we caught a bunch of fish, and then it just dropped off a cliff. And I'm getting that sense from the people further up as well, that was the story. So yeah, perhaps there is a change in pressure coming. Paul said that the water had cleared down a little bit as well. Don't know if that had something. I know when the water's starting to clear, or when, certainly at home at least, where I fish, that when the river's starting to come up and colour, the fish bite. And then as it's starting to clear through, and perhaps they'd fed well this morning as it was clearing through, I don't know. But it was one of those life-affirming days, one of those fun days, one of those good days. We've been talking about, right, where do we fish next, or fancy fishing here sort of days. And they were really good. And just being able to chat, laugh, have fun. We were catching some sticks, and we would get more and more excited about who caught the biggest stick. And they're the fun parts of it as well. So the fish were great. They could have been a little bit more obliging in the afternoon, but it didn't really matter that much. So, what we've tried to do is pass on, and this is, as it always is, it's just one take. We're not saying, oh, we'll say this, say that. It's exactly as it happens. And I kind of like it from that point of view. It's honest, and, it could have been a bonanza this afternoon, but it wasn't. And we've not dressed it up as anything else. And, I'm sure I'll make the long drive home, as will Paul, asking ourselves, I wonder if it was because of this. I wonder if it's because of that. And that's what I love about this pastime that we have, that we keep coming back to it because it's never the same. No 2 days are ever the same. And that's the wonderful thing about it. But yeah, what are your reflections on the day, mate?
Just echo pretty much what you said there, Pete. I mean, that's one of the absolute charms and delights about fly fishing, is all these unanswered questions, and long may they remain, because that's ultimately what keeps us coming back, I guess. I mean, yeah, a little bit of knowledge and understanding's fantastic, but deep down, we'll never know and fully understand it, which I think that's fantastic personally. And it's kind of what I would call a back to front day. Usually we would expect the best fishing in the afternoon. I mean, we were both rubbing his hands this morning thinking, God, if this is what the morning's like, what we're going to clean up this afternoon. And it just took a nosedive, really. And that's fishing. I mean, in reflection, I suppose we dropped on a couple of rising fish, and when we were first chatting on the podcast, we spoke about that, and really then I should have gone and looked for a piece of water, but you don't know how the day's going to pan out. You think it's going to get better, and I'll just wait a wee while, let some more fish start feeding, let a little bit more fly come off. That didn't materialise. In hindsight, we would have done better if we'd rigged up with dries right off the bat and searched out a little bit more sort of dry fly water. However, we didn't know that. I think we kind of maximised our opportunities this morning on the shallow runs we were on with the smaller nymphs and upstream nymphing with little wool indicators. It worked extremely well. It was pleasure to fish like that in some respects, that I often treat the piece of wool like a dry fly, and I get it to try and drift as drag free as possible, thinking, deeper down my nymph will be emulating that kind of thing. And it is visual to some degree because you've seen the indicator tick away. I think you caught the biggest stick, and I think I caught the most sticks actually. I think I beat you hands down with that one. And it was really fun. Arguably, if you were looking at it hardcore and thinking, from a fishing perspective of the afternoon, you could feel hard done to, but that's what fishing's about. Think of the number of times, or I can, when I've gone out for an evening rise, thinking it's going to go down, the conditions are perfect, you've got nice temperature, light winds, blah, 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 and it just does not happen. So that's what we're looking at the end of the day, really.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And you mentioned about the yarn indicators as well, and that's been really good fun. And if you haven't fished this way in a while, because I guess our default really these days is to think about the tight line, the Euro nymphing setups. But you know what? It was really good fun. And I guess, there is the sensitivity aspect of it when a fish takes a Euro, you've got a pretty good chance of it registering. It may not always with an indicator, but I didn't really feel any stage undergunned or underprepared fishing that way today.
Pete, what I'd add to that is you mentioned Euro nymphing, or short line, tight line nymphing, if you like. It's extremely effective. There's no question about that. It's such a successful method. And the go-to, if I felt I was going to be, for want of a better term, hardcore nymphing all day, I would have perhaps rigged up with a French or Euro nymph leader. However, what we do, or what I was doing, it's a bit of a compromise. I've got my dry fly leader on. It's easy to knot on or attach a piece of wool up the leader a wee way. You've still got that turnover because you've got a taper, and it delivers a single nymph really on not just on cue, but with a degree of delicacy as well, which is required. And if I run into rising fish, simply a matter of just snipping off the nymph, popping on a dry fly, removing the piece of wool, and hey presto, you're ready for dry fly action. So it's a compromise. It's you've got a foot in either camp, so to speak, in my mind.
That's a good point. And I guess because of the conditions, it's not cold. If we'd have come down here and it was 0, it would have been Euro set up, and that would have been it. And I think as you've listened to this podcast, we've turned up, we saw some rising fish, so we thought, right, okay, they're looking upwards. So probably that's where the Euro setup was pushed to the side a little bit more, because we were thinking, right, okay, we may not need to be hugging right at the very bottom there. And so we had that flexibility to tie and dry should we wanted to. So on reflection, it kind of feels that we fished to the conditions, really, didn't we?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. We keep banging on about Euro nymphing, and I rocked up this morning with a leader set up in my pack and fully expected to pop that on. In fact, you said to me what you're setting up with, and I said, let's just wait until we get down there, having not seen the water. We got down there. There was a few rising fish, and again, just reiterating what I said earlier was perhaps in reflection or in hindsight, that would have been the time the fish were most active, certainly on the surface then, against the run of play really at that time of day. And we should have gone straight on the dry fly, but instead we decided to nymph. I took, like I said, the middle ground with the dry fly leader rather than the out-and-out Euro nymph leader. I suspect if I'd have fished that first pull through and contacted nothing on the rig we were fishing, I would have switched to the Euro leader properly.
Nice. And there we go. That's a really, hopefully a useful, interesting insight. And I think it comes round to the fact that fish the conditions, and what you're feeling and what you're seeing, and be prepared and don't be afraid to change. And if you need to change things up, do it. And follow your gut. And if you're starting to question your fly pattern, your leader, your indicator, whatever it may be, don't be afraid to make the changes. Make the changes quickly, and perhaps it might buy you an extra fish or two. But Paul, it's been an amazing day today. I've enjoyed every single second of it. I've laughed. We've talked. We've put the world to rights. Thank you again. We didn't even know we were going to do this. I said to him I had to walk back to the van to get the mics. I said, look, I've got it. I said, but I quite just fancy going fishing. But we ended up deciding we'd just share some views, news, whatever we were thinking at that moment. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to this as much as I have. It's been, like I say, one of those really good days on the water with great company. So I'd like to say a huge thank you for coming fishing today and chatting with me too.
Pete, absolute pleasure, but I think I owe you the thanks. I mean, to come and... first of all, we haven't fished together for such a long time, and as you said, it's nice to chew the fat and where the conversation goes. And I often wonder sometimes, you're perhaps not going to like me for saying this, but imagine if you just left the mic on in your pocket and it picks up some of the bizarre conversations we're having about fishing. And I think squirmy worms came up in conversation once or twice today, didn't they? Something like that. But no, absolute pleasure. I mean, to come and fish your water and enjoy a day with you, especially at this time of year, has been fantastic. So thank you.
Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this one. And as much as me, it's been one of those days on the water, and I know they're popular with people, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. There'll be plenty more coming very, very soon. There's an interesting little postscript to this podcast, and on the drive home, Paul phoned me to say, have you seen the news? And I said, no, I'd been listening to some music. But he told me that the weather report said that Storm Claudia was on its way, and that is the reason that perhaps we saw that massive fall on the barometer. So perhaps there is something in there. As I said, it was really peculiar the way that the fishing switched off, and perhaps we got to the bottom of why it actually did.
Thanks for listening to the Fly Culture Podcast, brought to you in association with the Voice of Game Angling, Trout and Salmon, where Pete is the editor.